Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's Netflix documentary started off by painting the media as the main villain in their story, but it's in the second half of the series that we see the couple put most of the blame on the royal family. They used the last few episodes to provide a list of grievances with the palace, accusing them of releasing an official statement without Harry's permission, or actively squashing any negative headlines that would reflect poorly on Prince William. So what do you think is the craziest allegation in the series? Let's take a look at part 2 of top 10 lies exposed in the Harry and Meghan Netflix documentary. Number 10, the Queen was influenced. Palace courtiers have dismissed suggestions made by Harry that the Queen was influenced by her aides when she decided that he was out as a working royal. In the second half of his Netflix series, Harry claimed that his grandmother was swayed by the opinions of others, especially during the Sandringham Summit in January of 2020, which was made to determine the future of Harry and Meghan as royals. He said, "You have to understand that from a family's perspective, especially from hers, there are ways of doing things, and her ultimate mission, goal/responsibility is the institution. People around her are telling her that proposal or these two are doing X, Y, and Z is going to be seen as an attack on the institution. Then she's going to go on the advice that she's been given." But courtiers within the palace have cast doubt on his version of events, with those close to the situation claiming that at the time the Queen was strong and sharp enough to make the decision herself. One inside source told The Times, "It's outrageous. Harry never wanted to admit to himself that it was the Queen who said, 'No, you're out.' He couldn't fathom that he wasn't the cheeky chappy who was going to sweet-talk grandma into getting what he wanted." Another source said that he had deliberately shifted the narrative about his grandmother. When he wasn't getting the support from her that he wanted, he represented her as passive, someone who only sat in the corner and listened. Number 9, the truth about Meghan's niece. Meghan claimed her half-sister was suddenly everywhere when her relationship with Harry went public. She said that she was shocked by her comments in the press and said, "I don't know your middle name. I don't know your birthday. You're telling these people you raised me and calling me Princess Pushy." Samantha has since appeared on Sunrise this morning, and she certainly did not hold back her opinions about her sister. She said, "First of all, I will not call it a documentary. When I was trying to appropriately name it, it was a floppymentary. It is so much rhetoric at this point, and so many lies have been thrown out there, debunked, and yet there is still repeated need to push this narrative. It is ridiculous. It borders on comedy. It's that bad." The Sunrise host then asked her how she felt about the comments made about her specifically in the third episode of the series by both Meghan and her biological daughter Ashley Hale. In response, Samantha said that Meghan lied about the entire situation and that Ashley not getting invited to the wedding was not the royal family's decision, it was Meghan's. She said, "No, I knew she was not at the wedding and it kind of saddened me, but it is surprising to hear that there was a narrative spun that made Ashley feel like she was not invited because of something having to do with me." So basically, she didn't feel that the royal family had instructed Meghan not to invite her niece, a claim that has now been debunked by multiple sources. Number 8, stories planted against them. One of the biggest accusations leveled against Prince William was that he and his office had been planting negative stories about the Sussexes. Harry spoke of the dirty game that was played by the royal communications teams and the media, where they would trade damaging stories about one family member in exchange for a negative story about another one being dropped. He said, "There's leaking, but there's also planting of stories. So if the comms team want to be able to remove a negative story about their principal, they will trade and give you something about someone else's principal." He went on to say, "To see my brother's office copy the very thing that we promised the two of us would never do, that was heartbreaking. I would far rather get destroyed in the press than play along with this game or this business of trading." Harry's claim that stories were leaked and planted by royal comms teams to remove a negative story about their principal really comes and goes without much context. In fact, a lot of the things that Harry has been saying on this point seems to be referring to what he witnessed as a child with his father's office. But then he says that he saw William's office do the very same thing without explaining why he thinks this or what stories he believes were planted or traded. Number 7, the Renovation Controversy. Meghan and Harry joked that their first royal home was too small and not what anyone would expect from a property in palace grounds. Before they got married, the couple arrived in Nottingham Cottage, which is a grace and favour home in the grounds of Kensington Palace. Then they later moved to Frogmore Cottage in Home Park, Windsor. But Meghan and Harry lament the reality of living at the cottage, which they says sounds like a palace, but it really wasn't. Harry said, as far as people were concerned, we were living in a palace, and we were in a cottage on the palace grounds. Meghan said, Kensington Palace sounds very regal, of course it does. It says palace in the name, but Nottingham Cottage was so small. Complained about how it had very low ceilings, and insisted that Harry would often bump his head because of them. This was one of the worst parts of the docuseries, as they tried their best to make the property seem undesirable. Of course, they did not address the renovation controversy at all. In fact, they subtly justified it. If you didn't know, they were accused of using exorbitant amounts of taxpayer funds to renovate the home, which was a little over $3 million. They eventually repaid it all, but only after being criticized in the name of public interest. Number 6, claims of jealousy. Amidst the list of bombshell accusations in the second installment of the series, viewers could not help questioning something that Harry said about his wife. He truly believed that there was some kind of jealousy from other royals towards Meghan, given the amount of media attention that she was receiving. He said the issue is when someone who's marrying in, who should be a supporting act, is then stealing the limelight or doing the job better than the person who was born to do this, that upsets people. It upsets the balance. Because you've been led to believe that the only way your charities can succeed and your mission can grow is if you are on the front pages of those newspapers. Harry then gave an example, saying that the first time the penny dropped was when he and Meghan were at Buckingham Palace after a joint event with every senior member of the royal family. That morning, every paper had Meghan front and center, with Kate Middleton on the side. According to the couple, it was at this point that they started being targeted by the monarchy that wanted them to fail because they stole the limelight. But this is represented with no evidence. In fact, the idea is mostly proposed by friends or contributors that were interviewed, which is a device that somehow leaves you feeling that the couple weren't quite prepared to say certain things themselves, but were quite happy for others to do so. Number 5, excluded from the family. The couple spoke about the moment they saw the rest of the family at Westminster Abbey for the Commonwealth service. This was apparently the first time they saw each other in person since announcing their decision to step back from their duties. And Harry said the meeting both looked and felt cold. He said, I felt really distant from the rest of my family, which is interesting because so much of how they operate is what it looks like, not what it feels like. But it looked cold and it also felt cold. After discussing the death of his grandfather, Prince Philip, Harry brought up the time that he flew back to the UK to attend his funeral and admitted that it was hard going back for the first time since he and Meghan had left the family. It was difficult talking to his father and brother because they very much focus on the same misinterpretation of the whole situation. He said, none of us wanted to talk about it at my grandfather's funeral, but we did. I've had to make peace with the fact that we're probably never going to get a genuine apology or a genuine accountability. My wife and I were moving on, we're focused on what's coming next. So Harry believes that when he returned to the UK, his family were already giving him the cold shoulder. And it was at this moment that he realized they would never apologize for what they've apparently done. Number 4, the Sandringham Summit. In the 5th episode of the series, Harry talks about a meeting that took place within the family to discuss the couple's decision to break away. He claimed that the reason that Meghan wasn't there was because there were arrangements made to ensure that she was not in the room at the time. Harry said, it was terrifying to have my brother scream and shout at me, and my father say things that simply weren't true, and my grandmother sit quietly in the corner and sort of take it all in. He described that meeting as hard and said it ended without a solid plan of action. He said, the saddest part of it was the wedge created between myself and my brother, so that now he's on the institution side. The claim that Prince William screamed and shouted at Harry during the so-called Sandringham Summit, discussing their future, was an uncomfortable one, but it does actually make sense given the heated feelings on all sides at the time. But his suggestion that his father said things that were not true in that same meeting is largely meaningless, because he provides no context or further explanation as to what he could have been lying about. It seems as though the docuseries is deliberately filled with lots of ambiguity, as Harry and Meghan make a lot of assertions but offer very little facts to back them up. Number 3, Meghan praised by a crew member. Something that didn't sit right with a lot of viewers was a clip about the Freedom Flight, when Meghan was leaving the UK for good after her final royal appearance, which was attending the Commonwealth Day service at Westminster Abbey. Apparently, one of the crew members on the flight came up to her and thanked her for her royal service, which made her very emotional. She recalled the moment saying, "I get on the plane and not the pilot but whoever was overseeing the crew, he came and he knelt next to my seat and took his hat off. I just remember looking at him and he goes, 'We appreciate everything you did for our country.'" Meghan explained that it was the first time someone had recognized the sacrifice that she made. She said, "Not for my own country, for this country. It's not mine." And that's the piece that's so triggering, because you go and it still wasn't good enough and you still don't fit in. According to Meghan, once she landed in Canada, she collapsed in the arms of one of the security guards and started crying, saying, "I tried so hard," to which the security guard apparently says, "I know you did, ma'am." The added drama might have been necessary for something on Netflix, but a lot of this seems more like the plot of one of their TV shows rather than a legitimate fact-based documentary. Number 2, attacked by the media. The documentary was loaded with negative headlines about Meghan, insinuating that this is what pushed them to the breaking point. Harry said the toll was visible, the emotional toll that it was having on both of us, but especially my wife. "We're going to have to change this for our own sake." He claimed that after their 2018 wedding, that was when the press really started to turn on them. Over 6-hour-long episodes, Harry and Meghan made it clear that they were crushed by the notoriously toxic tabloids, who were so egregiously racist and sexist in covering her. But it was the palace's lack of support that really broke them. The firm was unwilling to bend on their advantageous agreement with the royal press. In fact, since the docuseries aired, more and more people have been calling out the media for attacking Meghan. Top Gear's Jeremy Clarkson wrote a column in The Sun, which has provoked a mass outcry online, with social media users labeling it vile and horrific. In an article for the paper, Clarkson wrote that he loathed Meghan on a cellular level, and described a detailed depiction of her getting publicly shamed. As a result, his comments have drawn widespread condemnation. Number 1, their plans were ruined. In terms of the plan to give up their royal duties, Harry said that he initially asked for a half-in, half-out arrangement, where he and Meghan would have their own jobs but would still work in support of the Queen. The couple then described creating a plan that they hoped would bring them both safety and peace of mind. They talked about relocating to New Zealand or South Africa before they ultimately settled on Canada. In 2019, Harry claimed that the palace signed off on them moving to South Africa, which is something that the officers of his father, his brother, his grandmother knew about. He said no one else knew. It was very much an internal document. Then it was leaked to the Times newspaper, and the whole plan was then scrapped. After this, he spoke to Charles over the phone about the possibility of them moving to Canada, and he was told to put the request in writing. Only later did they find out that the tabloids knew about their proposal, as the emails to his father had somehow been leaked. According to Harry, once their Canada plans became a public debate, it was never going to happen. Meghan was a little more bold in making the accusation. She said, "His dad said put it in writing, and he did." And it was just 5 days later that it was on the front page of a newspaper. So they made no effort to hide that they clearly believed the family was well and truly behind the leak. Well, that's everything that we have on the list for today. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next video.